And I'm really happy to have with us Stefan Latuski, who is since recently, only since a few months, the Chief Executive Officer of the IT Systemhaus of the Federal Employment Agency in Germany. It would be great, Stefan, if you could also tell us what the IT Systemhaus actually is before you start. But before that, he was CIO of Siemens Mobility, and also before that in other roles at Siemens. So I'm really, really grateful and happy to have him here. And I'm looking forward to the next 20, 30 minutes of his talk about unified in diversity, hiring a new culture. Over to you, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julian. And yeah, to directly answer your question, what the heck is the IT System House or IT Shared Service Center of the Federal Employment Agency in Germany? You know, we are, I think, by far even the biggest IT service provider in Europe's public sector. And basically, you know, we are doing all kind of technology and all kind of IT services, IT projects, change requests, whatever, you name it, for the federal agency here in Germany, which is around 135,000 employees, which we are serving day in, day out with all kind of technology. Yeah. And first of all, for sure, thanks a lot for inviting me to this event. It's really a pleasure to talk to you guys. My name is Stefan. I'm 38 years old. And as you then rightfully said, currently I'm the CEO of that IT Shared Service Center of the federal agency. And I was working approximately 15 years before for Siemens in various different roles, and in particular for Siemens Mobility, which is, you know, market leader in the railway industry around the world. Yeah, almost the last 5 or 6 years. I was heading, you know, the IT organization for rolling stock, which, you know, basically is all kind of different products on track, you know, like locomotives, commuter trains, high-speed trains, that kind of stuff. And later on, I also got the opportunity to become CIO of that entire company. And today, dear colleagues, I would like to speak a little bit about a journey which, yeah, kind of started beginning at 2020 at Siemens Mobility, and which is even gonna, you know, continue today, obviously even without me. And I will also try, you know, to kind of unleash a little bit of a secret sauce when it comes to the success of, you know, such kind of activities, which I will explain you in a second in that journey. So maybe we can, you know, switch to the first slide. And I don't see any slides, so someone needs to tell me whether, you know, if all those guys who are, you know, watching remotely here can already see that. Virtual ramp up slide. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So coming to that journey. So end of 2019, Siemens Mobility was in a very, very interesting situation, so to say, because luckily we have had a hell of an order intake. As a matter of fact, I think is what it was like 14 billion or something like this. So which obviously, you know, leads to an incredible resource demand situation. And as you know, trains today are not only basically consisting out of a lot of software, you might imagine that exactly this kind of resource demand was also, you know, in particular towards the technology organization. And on the other hand, you know, that tech organization, which I was responsible for, was managed over years, so to say, with a very clear outsourcing strategy. Means, you know, we didn't have that much of own employees. Basically, you know, when it comes to software development, software testing, all that kind of stuff, we have had a whole bunch of external suppliers who did that on our behalf. And, you know, that obviously comes along with some benefits, especially, you know, monetary benefits. However, we also, you know, simply have to admit that, you know, we never had that kind of situation that we were really satisfied when it comes to supplier quality. So we had to take a decision, you know, so either we continue our paths, you know, working basically with external suppliers, or, you know, going a different route, which in that case means stepping gradually away from an outsourcing strategy and starting to ramp up own employees in order to cope with that exactly, you know, incredible resource demand. And finally, we decided to ramp up our own resources. However, you know, due to the fact that it's kind of nearly impossible to find such a huge number of technology experts here in Germany, in the Franconian area, we decided to ramp up Technology Hub out of Germany. And if you are looking for tech experts outside of Germany, there's potentially only one country in the world which is full of high motivated experts that are looking for new opportunities, and that is India. So personally, I was living in South India, Chennai, between 2010 and 2012. And I was always kind of catched by that country because I do love very much the culture in India, and especially I admire the lot of pragmatism in that country, especially compared to Germany, for example. And that kind of convinced me finally to say, well, if we're going to ramp up a technology hub for Siemens Mobility, then we're going to ramp up that technology hub definitely in India. Long story short, I took a flight to Pune, India, the beginning of 2020. And I signed a rental agreement, and I hired the very first guy on site who, was supposed to, become the head or to lead that entire technology hub. And basically everything, was running as expected. And then something unforeseen happened. COVID-19 kicked in beginning of 2020. And that was, believe me, guys, a serious game changer. Because today, 1.5 years later, you guys might laugh about that, but early 2020, virtual recruitment seriously was kind of unthinkable for the entire Siemens environment. Yeah. So our whole ramp-up plan was, kind of based on face-to-face interviews. We have had, planned or budgeted hundreds of thousands of euros for travel expenses and so on and so forth, to have a whole bunch of flights to India, back and forth, and having, then face-to-face interviews, recruiting people and so on. But nothing of this obviously was possible due to a freaking global pandemic situation. So hence we had to choose to either postpone the whole ramp up or, going a different way. And taking into consideration, that we still had that incredible resource demand and we cannot postpone customer projects, we had to find a solution. So guess what? We went that new way, and ultimately, we as Siemens Mobility IT, we have been the very first ones in the whole Siemens enterprise who ramped up an entire organization in a fully fledged virtual mode. So we conducted about 750 job interviews, and a few months later, the first colleagues joined our new technology hub. But as a matter of fact, the real work was just about to start, because, hiring people in a virtual environment kind of feels strange at the beginning. However, it's relatively easy to do so. The more challenging part is to, virtually integrate people into an existing organization where, some people might know each other already for decades. So we had to conduct, a whole bunch of activities to integrate both worlds, means, the virtual world in India and then, the on-site world, in particular in Germany. And then especially you had to deal with those different kind of cultures. As I said, there's a lot of pragmatism in India, and then there's a lot of structure in Germany, and that, to a certain degree couldn't be more different, right? So we had to conduct all those virtual onboarding weeks, for example, and then we went for the situation where every new joiner was assigned to a personal buddy, just to give you some examples. Or, we also had a whole bunch of virtual team building events and so on and so forth. So we really did a lot in order to, somehow integrate those both worlds. And about 1.5 years later, I would say I can tell you guys that it was definitely the right decision to take that risk and, ramping up this technology hub in a full-fledged virtual environment. Because meanwhile, there are more than 100 colleagues from India working for Siemens Mobility. And the journey is going to continue constantly, because until end of 2022, Siemens Mobility expects further growth to, I think, at least more than 250 plus people in that tech hub. So why has that journey been so successful? I was telling you at the beginning that I will unleash some, kind of secret sauce when it comes to that success. So maybe we can jump to the next slide, and someone please should give me an hint if we are there. Perfect. Well, as a matter of fact, there are 4 important factors when it comes to success of such kind of activities. First of all, it all starts with proper preparation. Means, after creating a sound business case, it was definitely crucial to have at least someone in India locally sitting who could take care of all those local kind of necessities, like dealing with the authorities and so on and so forth. And today I'm fully convinced if we wouldn't have that one guy which has been hired at the beginning of 2020, there wouldn't be any possibility to ramp up that entire hub. So that was really crucial. And then number two, guys, virtual recruitment is not as easy as it sounds at the beginning. I mean, basically you have to trust into what you hear and what you see via camera, and then, taking into consideration that, bandwidth might not be always the best one sometimes, and so on and so forth. That's really a little bit of a difficult situation then to choose the right talents for your organization. So in that regards, it's really, really important to first of all have a very clear understanding what you are looking for on the one hand, but then also secondly, having a clear interview structure or a clear structure in general to make your candidates somehow comparable. And finally, and I think that's kind of most of important, at least we learned it when it comes to dealing with India, is you have to stay in content touch with those guys you have already hired until they really join your company. Because unfortunately, there is a relatively high dropout rate in India, which you somehow have to deal with. So if there is a time frame from, I don't know, like several weeks or several months until someone is going to join your organization, you really have to stay in constant touch with those guys in order to ensure that they are not looking for an alternative. And then number three, and that, dear colleagues, is something which is really important for me. Once you have the people on board, you have to take care of them, which is not that easy if you have to interact in a virtual only mode of operations. So for sure, you have to explain those guys a lot, like, organizational structures, rules, restrictions, orders, you name it. Yeah. But most important from day one onwards is explain those guys why they are supposed to do whatever they are supposed to do. You have to explain them, why they need to do something and what is their individual contribution to whatever kind the bigger picture is. They need to understand what's their individual contribution when it comes to, contributing to the bigger picture, to the bigger why of your organization. And finally, number four, you have to ensure, that an old organization and a new organization somehow, merge into some sort of common organization. So you have to build that one common team, right? And if you want to achieve that, you have to create that sense of belonging. People want to belong to something, and it's your responsibility as leaders to, ensure that people have exactly this kind of feeling of belonging. And that, guys, has to be achieved by giving, what we call psychological safety. Means there are three different kind of dimensions which we have to follow in order to achieve that, psychological safety. And then finally, people have that kind of belonging. Means, if we're going to talk about those three topics, first of all, freedom of speech. Everyone in your organization must have the possibility to speak up. Number two, accept the people as they are. Every individual in your organization is different, and we simply have to accept that people are as they are. And then finally, establishing that kind of failure culture means, we have to have an environment that people are not afraid of doing something wrong. And if we are following those three simple rules, then we have exactly this environment of psychological safety. And then, it's relatively simple to create that sense of belonging. So let's sum up. If you guys want to build a new team, irrespectively, if that happens in India, in Germany, or somewhere else in the world, you have to follow those couple of rules. Number one, be prepared and hire at least one guy locally wherever it is. Number two, virtual recruitment requires much more structure and preparation and comparability compared to having face-to-face interviews. Number 3, once you have the people on board, explain them why they are supposed to whatever they are supposed to do. And number 4, create that sense of belonging by dealing with psychological safety. So let's move on to the last slide already, because I want to give you guys one last final statement, which is really important for me. And then we will, give it back to Berlin. Are we already on the last slide? Perfect. So guys, yeah, we have talked a lot, but if I want you guys to remember only one sentence, then please always keep your people in the center of all your actions, because they are the most valuable asset you have. Thank you very much, and back to Berlin.
Thank you, Stefan. That was a great talk, and also probably one of the most important factors these times when you're hiring. And I'm glad you spoke about psychological safety. I think it's also something that is easily missed. And there's a very famous book on, I don't know if it's famous, but it's definitely one of the very helpful books that I read. I think it's called The Fearless Organization by Amy Edrison. I don't remember the last name, but yes. So great points there. And thank you so much for joining us today.